Chapter 25. Late Night Gathering. Ferry woke up to Mrs. Nose's high-pitched voice. He decided not to come down for breakfast just yet. Instead, he listened to another of their neighbors' tall tales from the top of the stairs leading to the kitchen. She was talking with urgency, waving her hands as if swatting flies. And then he went through the fence, right into your front garden. He didn't jump over the fence. He really went through the fence, she exclaimed. I can't tell you the fright it gave me, Mrs. Nosey continued, gasping. He was covered in fur from head to toe and had red eyes. Believe me, I saw him clearly. I was by the window, waiting for Mr. Nosey to come home. The Donovans rarely invited Mrs. Nosey to their house. None of them liked her curious, gossipy nature. But considering the latest oddities in town, she decided it was time to pay them a visit. Uninvited. That was 3 nights ago, she went on. Then I saw that winged creature flying over your house. I'm pretty sure it wasn't a bird, it was too big for a bird. It was a man with black wings. He flew in circles over your house and landed in your walnut tree. I don't know how long he stayed there, for I was too frightened to look. I crossed myself and spat 3 times. Then I jumped 3 times on one leg, as my poor mother taught me, to keep the evil away. When Mr. Nosey arrived, that creature was gone, she added, shaking her head. Mrs. Nosey was talking all by herself. Once in a while, Eileen nodded. Her husband, obviously irritated for not being allowed to read his newspaper in peace, was throwing in a yes or of course from time to time, hoping she would eventually leave. But Mrs. Nosey had no intention of leaving. She sat comfortably at the kitchen table, sipping her hot tea and nibbling on walnut cookies. Crumbs fell from her mouth, dangerously close to Mr. Donovan's newspaper. He retreated to the edge of the table, muttering about how awful she must have felt about the entire situation. Then 2 nights ago, I saw a man in a hat, sunglasses, and a raincoat. He was with a woman wearing a pointy hat. Who would wear sunglasses during winter at night? Don't you find that odd? She asked, pausing to catch her breath. I'm sure you were just tired at the end of a long day, Eileen tried to comfort her. Oh no, dear. I'm quite sure what I saw was real, she insisted, tilting her head. Ferry decided to go down to breakfast so he wouldn't be late for school. He greeted their guest, feeling a bit uncomfortable. He knew Mrs. Nosey never really liked him. She was always staring at him. Even now, in front of his parents, she couldn't stop staring. Ferry dear, you look so big. They grow up so fast, she added, turning to his mother. You look absolutely charming, she said, forcing a smile and trying to sound nice. But Ferry, with his long eyes, white eyelashes, pale skin, and white hair, looked anything but charming. Ferry sat at the table, sipping the chamomile tea his mother made every morning, feeling Mrs. Nose's prying eyes on him. She eventually went back to her story. And that's not all. The other night, I was sitting by the window. It was getting dark. That's when they usually appear, you know? What was I saying? She added, catching her breath. Then she continued even more excitedly. Oh, last night, guess what I saw with my own eyes? A tall, large man, wearing a long coat that reached the ground and a turban. He appeared in front of your house out of nowhere, I'm telling you. He watched the house for a few moments and then he vanished. Just like that. Poof. I ran out of my house as fast as I could, but he was gone. Yet he left something behind. Some footprints. There were hoof marks in the snow. She shouted. Ferry almost choked on his tea when he heard about the hoofed man. He had found Mrs. Nose's story amusing until then. Now he was all ears. The footprints, she continued, appeared out of nowhere and ended the same way. As if that creature came from nowhere. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. Yet Mr. Donovan's patience was running out. He folded his newspaper and looked her straight in the eye. All right then, What do you think we should do about it? Mrs. Nosy started acting all important. Well, I've talked to my husband and a couple of my friends from the church. We decided that some of us should watch your house. From a hidden place, of course. Your workshop seems like the perfect spot. My husband already volunteered. I'm sure Mrs. Donovan will be kind enough to make one of her famous pies for us the watchers, she said, clapping her hands with excitement. The watchers? Asked Peter, raising an eyebrow. That's what we decided to call our group of kind vigilant neighbors, said Mrs. Nosy, clasping her puffy hands to her chest. But Peter had had enough. Mrs. Nosy, if you think I am going to let some bored old people hang around in my garden and workshop, playing detectives, you are terribly wrong, he shouted. We are respectable members of this town, and I won't let an old lady with too much wine in her head gossip about us. Mrs. Nosy stood up from the table with difficulty. Mr. Donovan, what are you implying? I'm not implying anything. I'm telling you straight, I won't allow you to spread nonsense about my home. We've never seen nor have anything to do with those strange people you claim you saw. Then he got up from the table and stormed out the door, slamming it behind him. Mrs. Nosy began sobbing, searching for her handkerchief in the pocket of her enormous dress while she slowly sat back down at the table. Eileen gently put her hand on her shoulder. Mrs. Nosy, if you think you saw something, then maybe you did. Maybe it was just the shadows of the trees at dusk. Or maybe some child's toy marks in the snow. Or maybe you were just tired. But you shouldn't worry about those things anymore. They're only upsetting you. More tea. Ferry was almost certain about the identity of the 4 mysterious strangers causing such a stir in his town. They must have been their pets, just as he had suspected from the start. However, the last stranger Mrs. Nosy mentioned at breakfast intrigued him. At school, the visitors were as exciting for the children as they were for the grown-ups. The children came up with dozens of theories, each one more curious than the last. I think they're extraterrestrials, said Ben with a twinkle in his eye. Maybe they sent messengers ahead to study us before the Great Invasion. You and your extraterrestrials, Matilda cut in. If it were up to you, you'd be happy to see this planet invaded. What kind of human being are you? It's not that, but wouldn't you want to learn more about other worlds? I'm sure extraterrestrials exist. And if they ever decide to meet us, I hope to be among the first to make contact with them. I'm not afraid, Ben bragged. I bet you'd be among the first to run, Matilda said, laughing. But the strangers kept on showing up in the most curious places. A feeling of uneasiness was coming upon the people of Goodharts. Nobody knew who they were or what they wanted. Nobody except Ferry. Soon, encounters with the 4 strangers became even more frequent. Ferry, Matilda, and Ben saw them at every street corner, whether they were going to or coming from school. Matilda even dared to follow one of them, the one dressed like a detective, all the way to a dead end. But just around the corner, he vanished without a trace, as if he had evaporated. If only Shadow were here, I'm sure we would have caught him, she said. I wonder what could have happened to him. He's been missing before, but never this long. I hope he'll come back. I really miss him, she added with a sigh. The same sadness had taken over Ben and May ever since their pets went missing. Ferry wished he could tell them the truth, but that would mean revealing the truth about himself, and he wasn't ready for that yet. The strangers continued to appear. The children saw them at the playground, hidden behind the old trees. They were just watching. If a brave child stepped closer, the strangers would simply disappear. I bet those freaks are friends of Ferry, Billy said one morning in the classroom. How come they always show up where he is? Ferry didn't say a word. How could he, when he knew Billy was right? Billy pried. Not everything weird in this town has something to do with Ferry, Matilda defended her friend. Yet Ben seemed to be giving Billy's idea some serious thought. Even the local newspaper, The Voice of Goodharts, noticed the presence of the strangers in town and warned locals to be cautious. Before the strangers appeared, the newspaper mostly covered the cost of groceries, local holidays, and how important the sawmill was to the town's prosperity. But suddenly, Mr. Porter, also known as Porter the Reporter, had turned into a genuine investigator. He owned the dairy store in town and, in his spare time, served as the reporter, editor, printer, and owner of the local newspaper. Now he had found the perfect subject to jolt the locals out of the numbness they fell into every February when nothing much happened in Goodharts. Unfortunately for Mr. Porter, his key witness was Mrs. Nosy, who wasn't the most reliable source. Most people dismissed her stories as exaggerations, to put it nicely, much to Mr. Donovan's relief, as he could now stop worrying about the watchers. Nevertheless, the townsfolk became more cautious about everything around them. Ferry, however, was afraid that someone might eventually catch one of those strangers, and then discover his secret. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, the hour when humans were fast asleep. It was also the hour when shadows took on eerie shapes, and ordinary sounds became deeper and darker. Anything could happen without anyone suspecting. At that late hour, Ferry couldn't sleep. He tried to think about nice things, a sunny day, muffins, his mother, and May. But nothing helped. His senses were more alert than ever. He could hear every crunch and creak. Outside, the wind howled through the night, making the shadows of the branches grow on his room's walls and turn into hideous creatures. When he felt the raven's stone burning against his chest, he knew something was about to happen. He jumped out of bed and went to the window. He could hear whispers carried by the wind. Somebody was out there, in the backyard. The branches of the walnut tree hid the silhouettes sheltered by its trunk. Ferry couldn't see or hear anything clearly, but the stone burned his chest, so he took it out and placed it on the nightstand. He quickly put on some clothes and slipped out of his room. He tiptoed down the stairs to the back door. The walnut tree was far from the house, and Ferry still couldn't see who was whispering in the backyard. He quietly stepped outside and hid behind a sheet his mother had hung to dry the day before. Through a small hole in the sheet, he could peep without being seen. His heart raced, and he could barely hold back a shout. Their pets were there. Izzy, Shadow, Harry, and Baldy. Or better yet, parsley, sage, rosemary, and thyme. Rosemary was sitting in Fairy's swing. She wasn't wearing her hat anymore, and her long ears could now move freely. Sage and parsley sat against the tree trunk. Thyme, his raven, was pacing back and forth in front of them. "I wonder why he wanted to see us," he said. "I don't know," Matilda's dog answered, now in the shape of a human wolf. "I've had the boy in my sight the whole time. We all have. Maybe we should have done more than that," the human lizard added. He wasn't wearing his hat or his funny raincoat, and his scales shimmered under the faint moonlight. The only one who seemed content was Rosemary. She was still swinging and giggling. Ferry thought he should tell May her hair was actually a she-hare when he heard footsteps coming closer. He shivered, just like all the magical creatures did. Now they were all on their feet. From somewhere beyond their neighbor's garden, someone was heading toward them. And the sound of steps he thought he heard was actually the sound of hooves. Ferry could barely breathe. It was Mr. Pancake. The very Mr. Pancake from Ben's circus poster. He was wearing a long, purple cloak that covered his body entirely. Ferry was almost afraid to look at him, fearful of the big, twisted horns majestically decorating his head and the yellow, devilish eyes that seemed to pierce the sheet behind which he was peeping. All the magical creatures bowed at his sight. "Lord Stephen, welcome. What brings you here now when so many hardships have come upon Acna?" The Pan, as Ben called such creatures, frowned. "I had to come," his voice thundered, making the air around vibrate. "Your behavior brought me here." None of the others dared to speak, their eyes fixed on the ground. "I had to leave Acna because of your foolishness," he roared. How could you show your real selves in front of so many humans? Lord Stefan, if I may, Sage dared to speak, we had to. We have limited powers when in animal shape. You interfered when he was arguing with the other boy. And I am talking about you, Time, he said, piercing the Raven Man with his icy gaze. I had no choice, Time said, facing the pan. That boy was hurting him. With iron even. But you broke the code of the Book of Fairies. We must not interfere in people's lives. Even if it's about one of our own kind. We must leave him to fend for himself. Time revolted. With the risk of being hurt. Yes, with the risk of being hurt. Our duty is to protect him from those who want to harm him, but of our own kind. Not to intrude into the lives of humans, the pan said, his fists clenched. Time lowered his gaze, his voice shaken. I'm so sorry. I just didn't want things to happen like the last time when I couldn't save them. It was only my fault. Pan's rage softened. No, Time. When will you stop blaming yourself? There were too many of them, and you were all alone. This time, there's more of you, each one with a special power. Together, you can protect him until his time shall come. Time hesitated. I don't think he is ready. The pan shook his head. Maybe not just yet. That's why we brought him here, into the world of humans. To keep him safe. He must not suspect anything. The less he knows, the better. We must wait for him to grow up. And here, in the world of humans, our waiting will be shorter. He will grow up and become what he is meant to be. Our savior. But Time didn't seem to agree. But he knows now. She told him. The pan seemed lost in thought. Maybe, he said, and for the first time, Ferry sensed hesitation. Yet he's in doubt. He doesn't know what to believe. Living among people for so long has made him more human and less fairy. He feels and thinks like a human. So he will try to find a reason for all the unusual things happening around him. That's what humans do. Sometimes, they even ignore the obvious. And what is unknown to them keeps them away. Fear keeps them away. The pan took a few steps away from the others, gazing into the distance towards the northern hills. What about her? How is she? He asked, and Ferry thought he heard a tremble in his voice. She is just like you know her, Time answered. Just as lonely and sad. She doesn't go out too often. I sometimes fly over her house and see her watching somewhere in the distance. The pan sighed, then turned to the others, regaining his confidence. All you have to do is not let him out of your sight. And you can do that best only in your animal shape. This is the only way you won't have people observing you. But we cannot protect him properly when we are animals, Sage, the human wolf, interrupted. That's why we are shifters, so we can change our shape when needed. When we are ourselves, our magic is much stronger. That doesn't mean you have to draw people's attention. The way you were dressed, the way you behaved, that drew attention to you even more. You should have tried to behave the way humans do. Now it was Parsley's turn to speak. Well, I think I had the best disguise. In Ben's house, there is a magical box with images and sounds coming out when you push a button. You can see stories inside that box. With no one having to tell. You can see those stories as they happen right in front of your eyes, he said with enthusiasm. And in one of those stories, which I usually watch on Saturday nights, the hero was best disguised when he wore a hat, sunglasses, and a raincoat. And no one seemed to notice him. It is a mystery to me why I drew everyone's attention in such a good disguise. The pan laughed, and his laughter echoed. That box you are talking about is not magical. It is just a human invention to forget about their worries and troubles. Nothing you watch is real. They are only illusions. But ordinary people don't dress like that. Maybe if you had dressed like the workers at the sawmill, people in this town wouldn't have minded you. Disguise is easy for you all, Rosemary interrupted. I have long legs and long ears. How could I possibly hide them? That is precisely why you have to go back to your animal shape. Garrett will be safe as long as he doesn't know too much about himself or about us. Remember, he has the Raven's Stone, one of the most powerful things in our world. But he doesn't know how to use it. Time snapped. And how can I possibly defend him as a raven? They've sent a nihil after him. They know about him. And they know where to find him. I could barely chase away the nihil when it came after him and his friends that night. And I certainly wouldn't have succeeded as a bird. Yes, but they also know he doesn't have fairy powers yet. They know he's never visited his land, and that his powers haven't been brought out. His powers will be revealed only then. Until then, we must keep him away from fairies, good or evil. You can always change into fairies if he is in danger. But until then, you must return to your animal shapes, said the pan firmly. It's easy for you, Sage mumbled. You get to be spoiled with treats. I sleep in my kennel every night and have bones for dinner. Parsley retorted, flies, locusts, and insects aren't quite a treat either. Fortunately, I get cookies in secret from time to time, from Ben's sisters. A rooster's crow interrupted their talk. The pan was preparing to leave, heading for the neighboring garden, the same place he came from. I must go, he said. And I'm afraid I can't come back here too soon. I also drew people's attention. I'm not a shifter like you. May the wind watch over your path, my lord, said Time, followed by all the other magical creatures, each taking a bow. Ferry didn't wait much longer. He snuck back to his room, got into bed, put his raven stone back on, and pulled the thick blanket over his head. He managed to sleep in the morning when darkness was chased away by daylight. Since that cold February night, nobody in Goodharts saw the strangers again. And that same night, all the pets returned to their little masters.